On the outskirts of Chattanooga, Tennessee, nestled between rolling hills and long-forgotten trails, stood an aging farmhouse with a porch that creaked in the wind and a flag fluttering proudly above it. The house belonged to Frank Delaney, a 74-year-old Vietnam veteran with calloused hands, a rigid back, and eyes that had seen too much of war and not enough of peace. He lived alone with his dog, Scout, a golden retriever with a limp from chasing one too many squirrels. Frank didn't talk much, especially not about the war. He kept to himself, rose with the sun, tended to a small vegetable garden, and spent his evenings on the porch, sipping coffee he insisted on drinking black. The neighbors respected him, though they rarely saw him. In the town's collective imagination, he was the silent sentinel, a man who had given a piece of himself to the country and came back with something missing. It was late October when Frank first saw her. A girl, no older than 16, sitting near his tool shed, huddled beneath a thin hoodie, her eyes swollen from crying. It had rained the night before, and the ground was damp. Her shoes were soaked, hair tangled, and her arms were crossed tightly, as if trying to disappear into herself. Frank stood there a long moment, staring. The girl stared back, defiant but exhausted. "You hungry?" he asked, voice gruff. She nodded slowly. He gestured toward the house. "Come on then. Got stew left over." She hesitated, then followed. Inside, the warmth of the old wood stove wrapped around her like a blanket. Frank served her a bowl of beef stew without asking questions. She devoured it. When she finished, she tried to thank him, but he just waved her off. "Got a name?" he asked finally. "Sky," she said. "With a..." "All right, Sky with a Y. You running from something?" Silence. Frank didn't push. That night, he let her sleep in the small guest room he hadn't used in years. He gave her Scout's extra blanket and left a glass of water by the nightstand. She stayed 3 nights before she spoke again. "My stepdad, he hit me," she said quietly one evening as they shelled peas together. "And my mom, she didn't believe me. So I left." Frank's hand paused over the bowl. He didn't look at her, just nodded. "You gonna send me back?" "No." "You gonna call the cops?" "No." "Why?" Frank finally looked at her. "Because I've seen too many people walk into fire when they were supposed to run. You ran. That takes guts." From that moment, an unspoken understanding formed between them. Frank didn't pry, and Sky didn't volunteer. But slowly, rhythm returned to the farmhouse. Sky helped in the garden, fed the chickens, learned to make scrambled eggs that didn't turn rubbery. Frank taught her how to patch a tire, chop wood, and whistle for Scout. At first, she flinched when he raised his voice, even when he was just yelling at a raccoon. But over time, the flinches faded. She began to call him Mr. D. He didn't correct her. On Veterans Day, Frank took out an old box from under his bed. It held photos, medals, and a folded flag. Sky watched him leaf through them silently. "You miss them?" she asked. "Every damn day," Frank said, his voice lower than usual. "Did it mess you up?" He chuckled dryly. "War don't mess you up. Coming back does." They didn't say more. In the weeks that followed, Sky began leaving notes around the house, little jokes or reminders taped to the fridge. "Scout's water bowl's empty," or "Don't forget your cane." Sometimes they made Frank smile. Sometimes they made him shake his head and mutter, "Teenagers." But one afternoon she wasn't there. Frank found a note on the kitchen counter. "Thank you for everything. I had to go." Sky. He searched the property. Nothing. She was gone. Days passed. Then weeks. Frank grew more irritable. The garden went untended. The house grew quieter than it ever had been. Then, one morning, a social worker named Lisa showed up at his door. "You're Mr. Delaney?" she asked. "Who's asking?" She smiled. "I work for a local outreach center. A girl named Sky came in. Said she'd been staying with you." Frank's heart nearly stopped. "She asked for help finding a shelter and getting into school," Lisa continued. "But she made me promise to tell you something. I'm okay. And I'm not scared anymore." Frank swallowed hard. "She also said you saved her life." He didn't respond. Just nodded once and closed the door gently. That night, he took out the folded flag again. Placed Sky's note beside it. Every few months, a letter would arrive. No return address. But the handwriting was unmistakable. One read, "I made honor roll. Can you believe that? I'm thinking of joining the army one day. Maybe I want to protect people the way you did." Another said, "Met a counselor who said I have resilience." I said, "Nah, I just had a stubborn old vet teach me not to quit." Each letter found a home in Frank's old war chest, now no longer filled with just ghosts, but hope. Years later, Frank passed away quietly in his sleep. Scout at his side, the flag neatly folded on his dresser. The news spread through the town, and at his funeral, a young woman in a sharp navy blue uniform stepped forward. She saluted the casket with trembling hands, tears streaking her cheeks. She introduced herself simply, Private First Class Skylar Moore. She told the mourners how Frank had taken her in, no questions asked, and how everything good in her life had started the moment he offered her stew and silence. After the service, she stayed behind, sat on his porch swing, and whispered, "You didn't fix me, Mr. D. You just believed I could fix myself." And that made all the difference. Moral: sometimes the greatest healing comes not from words, but from quiet, steadfast presence, and the willingness to open your door to someone who needs it most.